Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where every meal is served with ketchup. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Cheese's Crust. Good pies at a competitive price with home delivery in the greater Philadelphia area will leave you praying to Cheese's Crust.
My favorite one. That's my favorite one.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I'm Wes.
And I'm Todd.
And we are filmmakers who, like to apply our filmmaking knowledge and history as we look at films and what can we learn from them? What are the things that they're doing or not doing? Maybe sometimes there's missed opportunities that we're like, oh, if they had done this, it could have enhanced the film XYZ. Or, oh my God, I didn't see this coming. And here's where they set up this hidden payoff, that you just don't see coming. I think a lot of the best payoffs are the ones that you don't realize have been set up in the first place. Anyway, that's just what we like to do. We like to, analyze films and see what we can learn from it, get better at our craft, and also just because we enjoy talking and looking at movies.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
We got a lot to do. We're going to do a bonus episode after this for our Patreon members. And so maybe we'll let y'all in on that at the end of the episode. But what are we covering today, man?
Today we're covering The Batman, and it's just come out. So if you haven't seen it, at least at the recording of this episode, so if you haven't seen it, please pause this episode and go watch it. We're gonna be having a lot of spoilers going on, and we don't want to mess anything up for you, especially the viewing of a brand new movie. So
for sure, man. We'll look at a few things. We'll look at some of the cinematography, the way they use edge lighting or not. We'll also do a dive into the story and writing, Batman's breaks, Catwoman's story told through her boots, and all the payoffs of the movie, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
A quick synopsis of the film. When a serial killer begins murdering political figures in Gotham, Batman is forced to investigate the city's hidden corruption. It's directed by Matt Reeves, written by Matt Reeves and Peter Greig, cinematography by Greig Fraser, starring Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne and Batman, Zoe Kravitz as Selena Kyle and Catwoman, Jeffrey Wright as Lieutenant Gordon, Colin Farrell as the Penguin, Paul Dano as the Riddler, John Turturro as Falcone, Andy Serkis as Alfred, and Peter Sarsgaard as D.A. Colson.
What's going on? Who's the mustache with the broken nose? It's Kinsey, narcotics. He's one of the guys that got into it with at the Iceberg Lounge. What are you saying, Kinsey moonlights for the Penguin? No, he moonlights as a cop.
Nothing like having the entire police force taking a shot at you. Man, so I don't know if I guess if you could set me up with your expectations going in. Were you anticipating this movie? This has been a long time in coming. Or were you just like, okay, it's fine. There's another Batman coming out. I'll see it because, it's Batman. And then whether or not it lived up to your lack of expectation or too much expectation.
Yeah, I was definitely excited about this film from the first trailer on. The darkness, the roughness, at least from the trailer, it looked pretty aggressive, like much more aggressive than other Batman movies. Much more, I guess, real, for lack of a better term, like real life, I guess. It definitely wasn't in a lot of ways, a lot of huge capacity. However, I was looking forward to it, and I'm a big fan of Robert Pattinson, a fan of Zoe Kravitz too, and I was really, the biggest concern I had was their relationship. the Batman Catwoman relationship, it's just never been done well. Let's be honest. I mean, to me, it's always been, oh, the bat, kind of like very, campy and where she's just very, she's never gotten a good shake, I'll say. And then I'm also going to be a dissenter a little bit and say that I wasn't ever a massive fan of The Dark Knight and that trilogy. I mean, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I did love it. But I have some major qualms with it. And, after doing this podcast with me, 182 episodes now, my biggest pet peeve on superhero movies is that they're just too shiny, or they have too much comedic relief, or that there's stuff that they put in there relationship wise that doesn't work. And there's a lot of things that they try to cram in to superhero movies now that they don't need. Stick with the story, make it what it's supposed to be for that character, heighten that character's characteristics and what they're dealing with, and get out. And I mean, I just got to say, this movie totally hit it for me. I mean, I absolutely adored it from the beginning to the end. I loved the slow stillness. It was so slow. Oh my gosh. It was so quiet half the time. I mean, there was barely any, Batman barely yelled at all. I mean, it was like most of the conversation was very much what we just heard in the clip of like this whispering, whatever. And Pattinson's portrayal of Batman is spot on for me. That it just hit for me. Bale's, kind of growling voice was so annoying. It bothered the hell out of me. It always did. From the very beginning, I was like, I want to like this, because Christian Bale is one of the best actors out there. But but I feel like Pattinson had a really great balance between, changing his voice just slightly, but not completely different. I mean, and look, the whole mask thing and nobody knowing that it's Bruce Wayne, that it's just it's a kind of a given.
You go with
right?
it.
Yeah. You just kind of, like let it go. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We always just kind of expect that. So if we're expecting that anyway, what's the need to change your voice? Like, that's not going to trick anybody, right? Like, you can see half your face. I mean, it's pretty, and he's got a chiseled jawline. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Anyway, I loved their relationship, Catwoman and Batman. I totally bought it. I bought that, her making him chase her. I bought them leaving each other at the end. I bought his fighting to not want to be with her, but really wanting to be with her. I liked that. I didn't even know that was Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I had no idea.
Same. Yeah.
Zero idea. Just complete transformation. It was, whoever did the makeup on that deserves the Oscar. Absolutely. It's fantastic. I loved Turturro as Falcone. Was flawless, bro.
Yeah.
Just like, because the point of someone like Falcone is that he has to also be lovable and dangerous at the same time. Right? Because he has to be lovable because he's that's how he builds his empire. Because like people want to be around him. People want to be, but he's also super scary and he'll kill you in a second. And I completely bought him as that. And then Andy Serkis obviously was perfect. Paul Dano as the Riddler, of course, had to be. I mean, it was just really great. Overall, the mood was really, spot on for Batman. Very dark, very moody. I loved the cost, the way the actual deaths that the way the Riddler did it.
Mm-hmm.
It was gory without being gory, which is fantastic for a movie like this. Like he kills him really terrible ways, but it's not like Saw where they show it, or like, where there's blood everywhere and it's just gory for the sake of being gore. It was purposeful and calculated, just like, someone like the Riddler would be. It was fun and funny. Not like to him, not funny. And I saw it with my neighbor, and he said that he kind of like maybe wanted a little bit more comedic relief. And I absolutely did not. I don't want any comedic relief in this. If you try to make me laugh, you will lose me for the entire movie in Batman. Stop doing that shit. It is not funny. I don't like it. In 90% of all superhero movies, I don't like it. It's
Yeah,
not funny.
I'll lightly disagree in that the humor should come from a dark place, a la the Joker. Like anything that's funny should be very, very dark,
Yes.
and come from that place. And in that way, of course, it's adding to the stuff that you're talking about, the darkness and the edginess of the film itself. And so those are the kind of jokes I can get with. But I agree. Like I wouldn't want any like comedic relief.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. If it's dark, like from the Joker, and that's his character.
Right. Exactly.
So anyway, long story short, I really, really enjoyed it. There were a few moments that I felt like drug a little bit, but when it was dragging, I was also just enthralled. It was usually dragging when it was rarely quiet, and there was a ton of Batman in it. Ton of Batman. So anytime Batman was on screen, I was enthralled. Even if it was dragging, I didn't care. I'm like, oh, I just want to watch Pattinson as Batman longer. That's fine. Just like stay on him. I loved the sound design in this film too.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Okay. So all they did, let's be clear of how important sound design is. And I know we talk about this all the time and it's great. We're going to talk about it here, but really all they did was heighten his footsteps. They said, I can see this conversation between like Matt Reeves and the producer saying, and the sound engineer saying, I want his footsteps to be scary as hell. That's it. That's all you got to do. I want to hear his footsteps all the time, and I want them to be thuddy and heavy, like with the weight of his life, the weight of the burden he carries to improve Gotham, to like save these people, which we feel from the beginning, very first words he says to the very end. I want to feel that in every step. And anytime, whether we see him or not, I'm hearing those footsteps. And sometimes they're heavier than others, but they're always there. And it was perfect. It was like, it was his calling card. You know how sometimes we talk about motifs with, which there was great motifs here musically, with Batman, which there should be, but in this case, I felt it even more. The music was great, but his motif really was his footsteps. I mean, anytime we saw him or didn't even see him, but we're about to see him, the footsteps came in, and so I was like, knowing what to expect. From the first time we see him, when he walks out of the shadows to that group of guys who was going to beat up that guy in the subway, maybe there was music. I don't really remember if there was music or not, but I remember the footsteps. And so anytime I was like, in my head, I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to be hearing most of this movie. And it was great. Anyway, so I'll stop there and we can talk about some other things. I'm curious to what you think, because I think this could be, with us, maybe it's a polarizing thing. I don't know. I think I'll probably learn a little bit more from some of your notes that you're going to bring up, probably.
Yeah. I feel like I learned a lot. Walking out of so I've seen this twice. Walking out, I had very mixed feelings. I didn't love it, but there were things about it that I did love. And after watching it again, after sitting on it for a couple days and then watching it again, I don't think I really like it. I don't think it's a very good use of 3 hours. That's a lot of runtime. And you do need to justify it, and I don't think they did. And I will explain why. I have specific reasons why I don't think they justify that runtime, and we'll get into that much later. But just on the outset, the things that I did love, let's talk about that for a second, because there is so much to love. I agree. I love the tone. Excellent tone. It's dark. And for once, it really does fit all the aesthetics, right? The cinematography, the iconography. I think they went a little too far on his house. I mean, they didn't have to make it feel like he was living in an actual Victorian mansion. I think there was just a little too far there, but still, even with that, like the darkness of the film itself, not a lot of edge lighting. I think that was one of the things that jumped out at me early on. A lot of films use what you might call traditional 3-point lighting, sometimes just 2-point. And that's effectively 3 different types of lighting that you have. You have your main key light. This is the light that's giving you the brightest part of the lighting of the scene. Then they'll usually fill in. So like if you do Nixon hands, if you just kind of, imagine you are going to be lit up for a scene and you do what they call Nixon hands or Nixon fingers, right? I am not a crook. And you put your hands up the way he would, or the way we think he did. One of those hands you can pick, it doesn't matter which. Let's say your right hand is your key light, and then on your left hand will be the fill light. And so you'll have all this light kind of hitting you pretty good from one angle, and then they'll usually fill in some of the shadows a little bit so that you're not creating new shadows. You just maybe even just a bounce, right? You may not even have necessarily a whole other light, but you fill in some of those shadows. That's called the fill light. That's why it's called that. And then in the back, the third light is what you would call a rim light or an edge light, and that just kind of adds a little bit more dimension by helping you pop out from the background, right? That's usually going to be a much brighter white rim light. Think of like the edge of the moon, right? It's just this and as you watch movies or TV or commercials, you'll begin to see it, right? It's very specular. It's very shiny because of the difference between the background and then it's usually just so much brighter. Or sometimes it's blue. You can have a lot of fun with the edge light. This movie did almost none of that. Like they kind of just had their main key light and then that was it. Maybe, they would use a lot of what you would call like practical lights. And I don't even know that they necessarily lit with practicals, but they did such a strong job of making it feel like all the lighting was coming from the practicals in a way that it doesn't feel like there's a light anywhere near. I wouldn't be surprised if either A, they really did use practicals and available light and natural lighting and all these kinds of things. Or B, they just had 1,000 lights up there strategically placed so that you feel that way. And Greig Fraser is one of the best. I don't know how many films of his we've really covered. I mean, Dune would be one of them. But you can see like he has this very Deakins almost style of lighting where it feels very natural and embedded in the environment. And along with that is you're also not usually adding a lot of these edge lights, a lot of rim lighting. And I think that's specifically intentional because it blends the characters into the shadows, especially Bruce Wayne. The first time we meet Bruce Wayne, there's not only not an edge light on him, but there is one on Alfred. Alfred's over here talking to him. There's a very strong edge light on Alfred. And I think that's super intentional, right? It's blending him into the shadows. It's very much part of his character. There almost is no Bruce Wayne, right? There is only Batman, which I think story-wise is a bit of a problem, but we'll get into that. But generally, even absent that scene or that shot, there's just generally not a lot of rim lighting, and it's styled in a very single source method, a lot of reverse key, so that the light is coming from upstage into the camera, and in that way there's a lot of dimension and texture and mood. You create a ton of mood, and you're almost making the audience kind of squint into the shadows, and that's just the mood of Gotham, right? This is a dark story, it's a dark place, and it shouldn't feel safe, and very shallow depth of field. So that they're still able to control where you're looking and direct your eye. But the wide anamorphic, you get beautiful bokeh. The city itself feels like this beautiful thing, even though it's, dark and grim. So there's just a lot of interesting visuals, I think. And then that's just one of the things I really loved about this is I think it might be, to me, and the things that I want out of any project, it's probably the most beautiful superhero film out there. I don't know what else I would put against it in terms of actual aesthetics. For a superhero movie, this is my top pick without like flipping through a notebook. Certainly nothing in the MCU. I don't think there's anything in the MCU that could touch this. That's usually very bright and friendly. But yeah, that the style plays very well into the shady nature of the city. Another thing cinematography wise I really liked is the rooftop scene. They have several scenes up there on the rooftop, whereas Bat Signal is. And I think that's probably a virtual set. I don't know this for a fact. I think just based on what I was looking at, and I didn't want to look it up. I just thought it would be more fun to talk it out. But if it is a virtual set, I thought it was a really great use of a virtual set, because you're going to recycle this same setup multiple times in multiple lighting scenarios. Why not? Spend a few $100,000, maybe $1 million, and dress the hell out of that set. And now you can really maximize, because we spend a ton of time up there whenever you're talking about runtime. So it makes a lot of sense to maximize. And now you can even build out your cityscape right into the background. And man, does that flesh out the city. So I thought that was a beautiful choice. But if it's not a virtual set, which a virtual set just means that instead of green screen, you would have like projectors or these massive monitors up, kind of a rounded thing, so that you can program into a computer, project this thing that works in conjunction with the camera, so that as you move the camera, the city would act the exact same way as a city would act if you were filming a city. So like there might be a little parallax that happens in between buildings. And it's just a very high end way to create visual effects, instead of just doing, we're going to green screen it or blue screen it. No, instead you have the actual city up there, so that you can create the actual sense of depth in camera, and create a much more polished visual effect than you could ever get through green screening, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean that actually makes a lot of sense, because then they can spend all the time they want. They don't have to, scramble for golden hour, which they did several shots around then, or like dawn or dusk or whatever, and where you have 15, 20 minutes to get that take. Instead, you can spend all day, or multiple days getting a specific take. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
100%, because there is that scene. Because here's the thing: if this wasn't a virtual set, holy crap, did they film some of those scenes incredibly efficiently? Because there is this that scene you're talking about where it's either sunrise or sunset, I don't know which, but the sun is hanging just above a building in the distance, and we start on a wide there, and then the lighting never shifts throughout that entire scene, and we get a ton of coverage. That's probably a good 4 or 5 minute scene. And
in order to do that,
yeah, there's just no way. And the lighting never shifts, which again, maybe they shot it efficiently, where we're going to get these 2 wides with the sun in that shot, and then we're going to fake the lighting for the rest of the coverage, right? Because they do these close-ups and reverses, multiple angles. So it's not just like, we're going to get like 4 setups and we'll be able to get 2 cameras in to do like reverse, over the shoulder shots. No. They must have done like 10, 12 more setups. Like there was a ton of setups. And when you're doing that at gold, right at the end of golden hour, like that's insane. You're just not going to be able to do that, in that 15, 20 minute window, because the sun moves very, very quickly on the horizon. As you and I have experienced a number of times. I remember we were doing one scene in an office with one of our random clients, and I told her she wanted to grab this shot, and I had set up all the lighting. I was like, hey, if we're going to get the shot, we need to get it now. We have about 15, maybe 20 minutes before the sun moves behind that building, and all the lighting is going to get screwed up. And she was like, no, I need another minute. I was like, all right, I'm letting you know the sun doesn't care about your schedule.
Yeah.
and naturally, our fears came to pass within literally that 15 to 17 minute window. Yeah. And so if they didn't use a virtual set, hats off, because Greg Fraser might be a god. But, assuming you did, that's still a really great idea and use as a way to construct the city skyline in a way that fits the city you want to make. Because, you can't always do that in life, create the city like, hey, mayor, can we move that building or erect a new one? Anyway. Yep. But another thing I really loved, man, was this is something I've been waiting on for Batman for years and years and years, since I was a kid, which is the Dark Detective. Like, I have been dying to see this version of Batman. It's always been the Batman who's, maybe chasing things around and trying to piece things together, but it was never really the dark detective, where he's working with the cops and he's actually, trying to crack and understand the clues to a mystery. And that's this entirety of the film was that. And so for me, that was really exciting. And I loved that, of course, it's really hard to do a mystery of any caliber, let alone, insert a superhero into it. And so, I think ultimately that's probably going to be a lot of where my own issues are. But just to throw it back to you for a second before I get into all my notes, did you like, so one of the things I really loved about the soundscape was the overall music choices, right? Was really cool, that having that theme kind of kicking back in from the beginning to the end of the film. But also the use of Batman as a horror character for the villains. And they emphasize that, right, with these string stabs. They have these really strong horror string stabs that come in periodically. Like at the end of the film, whenever he bursts the fire extinguisher open, right, to give him some cover, and then the bad guys are all waiting around, and then they'd start doing the string stabs, and he comes out of the fog and starts whooping everyone's butt. So were there some of those elements that you liked? I don't know if you noticed that specifically, or some of the other music choices in there. How did you feel about the score and songs?
Yeah, I mean, well, the only thing really I already mentioned is the footsteps and his motif, his Batman actual, like there's a line that plays to signify him. The rest of it was great because I didn't really fully notice it. Like the only thing that I really noticed were those things that I mentioned. And I think that's really a great aspect of a score. Not every score, right? I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about some scores that we absolutely love and we wouldn't change a second of, and that have made the movie. The score makes the movie. In this case, I don't necessarily know that that's true. I don't think that it is. But I think it's fantastic in that it doesn't get in the way. It only heightens, right? Because really what we're there for, this isn't a movie that I want to be on this it's not an all enveloping film where all the puzzle pieces have to fit exactly together, like some of our favorite movies, right? In which case, where the score plays half of the importance of what we're watching. I think in this case, as long as it supports what's happening, and pushes it along, it could have been, it could have been completely different, and it still would have stood on itself, right? It still would have stood up, next to the film. As long as the motif didn't change and the footstep situation was there. Like those were the big things. I'm big on motif, especially with something as iconic as Batman, and I love what they did there. I just, it didn't really jump out at me, the score itself. So
yeah,
I like that.
Was that Nirvana that they were
absolutely
remaking throughout, right? I was in love with that. I mean, the first time they dropped that, I was like, this is working. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't mention that. I kind of forgot that. So thank you for bringing it up, because they bring that back multiple times. It's at the beginning, it's at the end. There's actually a section in the middle too, where I think it might be musical.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's, I mean, one, the song is brilliant and amazing, and Nirvana is one of my favorite bands of all time. But two, like the way that song was recorded is very much the style of sonically of how they spoke in this film. So they're very understated and quiet in their dialogue in this film. And the story behind how Kurt sang that song was he was in the booth and they just couldn't get it right. And he was upset and he was exhausted. So he laid down on the couch and he started humming it. And Butch Vig, who was the producer of that album, brilliant man, brought a mic over to him, put it on him as he was laying down on the couch. And that's how he sang the song. So it's like the most lazily sung, almost falling asleep kind of thing. which is perfect for how the dialogue in this film is also recorded, right? It's very subtle and understated and not small, very heavy, but at the same time, very just, quiet. So yeah, I absolutely love that. When they started playing it, I was sitting next to the guy I went with, and I said, "Oh my God." I just knew this is gonna be good. This is gonna be so good. So yeah, great point to that. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that definitely landed for me. I'll dive into some of these things
Please.
and see what pops up. But as far as story and writing goes, just to take a look first at the man himself, Bruce Wayne, Batman, introducing the new Batman universe. They use maybe too much monologue, voiceover. Like we start with this voiceover, right, and it's kind of emo, and it's Batman telling us how he feels and how the city's dark and how he doesn't think he's making a difference, and his frustration in that, but also how much everyone fears him, and his he's in every shadow in the mind of all the thugs in the city, and then of course we see as he's telling us all this, right, we're seeing it play out, right? There's a couple people in an alley, and one's whatever spray painting this and that, and they turn and look, and we have these beautiful kind of creeping shots into the darkness where he's not, but because his signal's in the sky, right, everyone's expecting him around the corner. He's on the prowl or whatever. And then we cut to this train, right, where there's these thugs who are watching a video of, I think, someone getting beat up, and that's right, they were playing this fake game called Knockout, and where they just one punch someone and they just fall out, and we follow them as they try to rob some random guy, and of course Batman beats all their asses, and I think this is a fairly meaningless victory, and I think it's supposed to be, right, because Batman's struggle that he's going on about is that he's not making a difference. Hence, we're going to see a meaningless victory take place. He just did something that isn't going to add up to anything, or at least anything that anyone other than that one guy is going to appreciate. I'm sure he appreciated it, of course. Victims always appreciate having help when it's needed, but ultimately it's not going to change the tide of the war that he's fighting. And of course, just because it's a meaningless victory to me doesn't mean it should be an otherwise meaningless scene, which I think it is. We, at the end of that scene, we connect with one of the bad guys, and there's no real payoff to this entire opening scene. And I think that's a sin for most movies. You shouldn't open on an introduction that really has no cumulative value. And so there's no real payoff to this scene. And that's something you kind of have to get used to in this movie, of not having a payoff. And so we spent 5 minutes up until this scene hearing about how Batman is now in every shadow, scaring every thug. And then he walks up to these guys in his full bat suit, and the first thing they ask, with the bat signal in the sky, who the hell are you supposed to be? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And of course, at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is create an opportunity to work in the I'm vengeance persona, which becomes, I think, for me, a bit tired. That's what Selena keeps calling him, because she doesn't know him by any other name, of course. And that's by his own design. And of course, it comes to a head. I think it would have worked for me a little bit better if they hadn't used it a few more times between that first time he says it and the last time he hears it come out of the mouth of that the shooter guy, right? Who are you? And he says, I'm vengeance. And then he kind of realizes the impact that he's had as a vigilante has been to encourage other types of villainy. And that's supposed to be, kind of his grand lesson in this whole story, which we may or may not come back to. I don't know. I get lost in my own stuff sometimes. But overall, Bruce Wayne, we're very thin on who he is. And so we never really flesh out much of Batman or Bruce, were entirely, I think, in my opinion, relying on the general knowledge and love of who he is. Like, if you walk in not knowing anything about Batman or Bruce Wayne, you're screwed. This film is not going to help you. You're just there's certainly, and I think that would be a little bit more forgiving if we were looking at a sub 2 hour film, but with a 3 hour runtime, it's hard to forgive not spending, over the course of that runtime, 20 minutes, getting a little bit more depth of his character and why he's so passionate about stopping everything. We kind of know that his parents were killed somehow by someone for something. We're really never the wiser about that whole backstory. And I think that's supposed to lead into some maybe future film or something. I don't know. But whenever his whole time is so devout to justice and curbing crime and corruption, I get that. I just think they walked a dangerous line because they didn't want to go the origin story route, but then they're still relying on origin story elements to tell their story. Like, you can't do both. You either have to skip all of that, or really commit, a quarter of the film, into setting up Batman becoming Batman and his whole ideology and why he's doing what he's doing. And so I thought they walked too dangerous of a ground when it comes to that. I think overall Batman gets too many breaks throughout the movie. I think as a principle, superheroes should create their own luck. And I don't think he really did that enough. He does it sometimes, like that scene at the end in the stadium where he creates that cloud. I thought that was awesome. That was a great moment of creating your own luck and creating your own circumstances. But I think there's maybe just too many times, and I'm not going to list them all because I didn't write them all down. But like in that same flood sequence, when he's up there, the shooter has a drop on him and the shooter's gun jams, which allows Batman to, of course, beat him up and throw him over or whatever he does. And that he's too much of a badass to ever deserve a break. You should never cut Batman a break. And if he does get a break, it needs to come for a reason, not just sheer luck. And that was 100% luck, and it's senseless to me. They never shoot him in the face, of course. And this, you could make this argument through most of Batman's, but I would say no other Batman has this much firepower coming at him. Like, he had an absurd number of machine gun bullets flying at him, sometimes at point blank range. And I don't understand why any bad guy, let alone dozens and dozens and dozens of them, would keep shooting him in the chest where you're clearly seeing no effect take place. Like, that drove me a little crazy, even though it did create one of the coolest moments where he's in the dark, right? And the only reflections are the machine gun fire, which I'm imagining that was all done practically, right? You're creating, I don't know how, whether it's, just through setting up these blanks that create these explosions out of the barrel of the fire, or what, I don't know, but that was a badass little sequence, even if it simultaneously drove me crazy. Because I don't know, there's just too many times when they clearly had the drop and they just opted to shoot him in the convenient place. I don't know. He could have earned. You gotta pick your poison. I just think they swallowed it instead. And so
I agree with that.
Catwoman, easily my favorite character in the film, and also completely agree with you. Best version of Catwoman we've ever seen, without a question. Not just because it's Zoe Kravitz, which was already good enough reason for me, but also because they just gave her more depth. They gave her so much more meaning and why she's in the story in the first place, and it wasn't hokey. The original Catwoman for me would have been Michelle Pfeiffer, who was awesome. I think she's fantastic. But it's Tim Burton's Batman, which has a certain layer of kind of cheese to it, which works in some ways and not in others. That's a whole other topic. Selena, this version of Selena Kyle, I believed, I was on board with, and I thought the best part of Batman and Bruce Wayne was Catwoman was Selena Kyle. She brought out everything that I liked about Bruce Wayne. She brought out, and without maybe even Zoe Kravitz herself, this might have been a very intolerable movie for me. But she brought so much charisma and charm and edge to the movie. I absolutely, hands down, best part of the movie for me. But one of the interesting things that I thought about her was the story of her boots. I thought that they did a great job of using her boots, which sounds, I know, very silly. But the first shot of her is actually her glossy vinyl boots. I'm assuming that's vinyl. I don't know what else that would have been. I don't know fabrics like that, so forgive my ignorance there. But of course, it's not just an accident that, that's the first shot. The boots immediately become relevant as he's looking at a photo of Annika and the mayor, and he sees her boots in the edge of the frame. That leads him on a mission to watch and observe her, and ends up leading to their connection throughout the rest of the film. And I just also imagine, as a writer, you get to control. Now, I know this was written by Matt Reeves and Peter Craig, Matt Reeves being the director as well. So it's almost written and directed by him. But even, let's imagine it was just written by Peter Craig. As a writer, you can actually direct the director subtly if you know how to write. And this gets into writing in a way that you assume there's only two things you get to do in screenwriting, which is you get to write what you see and write what you hear. You technically don't get to write anything else. Anything else you're writing, you're just shooting dice on, because if you can't see it and you can't hear it, it doesn't really exist in the film. And so there's very few opportunities to write things that don't show up in audio or visually, that you should have in a screenplay. Like character description, that's one of your freebies. Like, hey, describe a character to give the actor something and to help the reader understand kind of what this person is. Because as a viewer, once the character comes on, you feel so much just from seeing a person. You see so much just from seeing Selena Kyle. You feel things based on the way she's dressed and the way her posture is, the way she speaks. You don't get any of that reading it on the page. And so you get a little bit of a cheat there in your character description. But another way that you can direct the director is by the order you write things, the sequence of things as you describe them. And so if I'm writing the scene and describing Selena Kyle, she comes into frame, I don't start with Selena Kyle, 25, drop dead gorgeous, whatever, makes Bruce Wayne, Batman turn his head. Obviously, that's already just a bad description, because you don't need to describe Selena Kyle by how she looks, right? That's irrelevant. You describe maybe by what she does to the people in the room. Maybe you describe her in 1,000 other ways, but one, avoid her looks, except now maybe instead of even saying her name, maybe the first thing you do is you say, you cut to a new action line and you say, glossy, vinyl boots, step into the room. As we pan up, we reveal Selena Kyle, 25, a woman on a mission that you don't want to mess with, whatever, thing I would probably have everything. I would spend a good 15, 20 minutes just thinking about how I want to describe this character if it doesn't pop out immediately, just because I love grabbing the core of the character in some kind of analogy. That I think you can communicate so much so quickly in the viewer's mind by having a really good analogy at the tip of your tongue, and just kind of punching the reader with it. And so I would try to think of a good analogy, but that's literally how the shot sequence goes, because now the director's like, oh yeah, and then later in the scene, her boots come into play. Yeah, of course. The first thing that we're going to see when we see Selena Kyle is her boots, because that's a relevant part of not just the scene, but then later in the film, it becomes relevant again and again, because later they're also used as a red herring at a funeral, right? Where we meet Falcone, and Bruce Wayne sees he's in his, civvies now, his civilian wardrobe, and he sees the boots step out of this limo, and he can't see her face. He just sees those boots, and now he's following her. what the hell is she doing with Falcone? You can almost feel his blood rising, which is good because now you're asking all these interesting questions about Bruce. Why do you care? Or do you care, because it's Falcone, or do you care because she's with another man? Is there emotions tied in? And so there's all kinds of interesting things that you're able to pull out of Bruce just by using her boots. And of course, it triggers that whole sequence with Falcone, right? Where we hear a little bit of backstory, which honestly makes me feel more for Falcone than it does for Bruce. When you're hearing about him being helped by Thomas Wayne, and you're building out a lot of the world, and only a fraction of that is really going towards Bruce. But it ends with this little exchange that foreshadows something, right? The Hippocratic Oath. No, it's a little thing that, he's obligated to fulfill. And Falcone laughs, and of course he's laughing because he's thinking of the irony of Hippocratic Oath, because he sees Thomas Wayne as a hypocrite. And so there's all set up, of course, through her boots. That's a really nice way to lead into another scene. And then at the end of the movie, still on her boots, sorry, at the end of the movie, when the dam is burst, the levees are broken, there's a shot of water. She's on her bike and she's trying to exit the city, and she looks down and she sees water starting to wash over her boots. And we see actually her boots regain a little bit of shine, but because now they're dirty, they're filthy. And now, of course, water in the movie and in general is symbolic of renewal, of cleansing, right? And for her, she herself has lost a lot of who she is in this film through this whole pursuit of getting justice for her friend and finding her friend. And so now she is going to choose a different path. She's starting to regain herself, which is reflected in her boots. I thought they did an amazing job of just using something so simple to build out the rest of the story. Really, really strong storytelling on that front.
That's a great point. I would just say that's one of the things that's, even if you don't notice it, you feel it, right? Because I totally did not notice that. But now that you say all of that, it makes a lot of sense. But I felt it. I felt all those things that you're describing throughout describing her boots, but I felt it without knowing why, And that's some great storytelling right there.
It really is. But on that same note, like, I don't know why Annika was so important to Selena, right? I know they were friends, but and again, maybe not again, but maybe it's not ultimately that important. I'm fine with that. I don't think this was like mission critical. But also at the same time, I think the links that she goes to for her seems like either I missed something or they could have added another dimension to that story. And I don't know where, I don't know how.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it seemed like they were like together.
Yeah.
Did it seem like that to you?
I asked myself that question. And maybe there was an attempt at alluding to it without getting into it, because Batman is so beloved by everyone. Maybe they didn't want to like alienate any particular, demographic. But
they never said it.
They never said it. And so if that's the case, she's clearly bisexual because she has something for Batman, and which is all fine, of course. But whatever it was that made Annika so important to her, it never really, I don't know, it never landed. It never made it obvious, like, oh, other than I'm really upset y'all killed my best friend. And maybe it's just because of what the Joker says at the end, whenever you have so few, one becomes so important, a friend. When that's all you have, that's all you have.
So I thought it was Joker too, but could it be Two-Face?
It could be. Yeah. I mean,
I only caught one little moment where I saw teeth, but I don't know. The laugh made me think Joker for sure. And then I went to the restroom afterwards, and I was in the stall or in the urinal. And there were guys around me, random guys. And I was like, so who was that at the end? Is that Joker? And they go, one guy goes, I thought it was Two-Face. And I said, oh my gosh, maybe it is. I have no idea, but maybe it is. Anyway.
See, ladies, we talk in the bathroom too,
Absolutely. Only about superheroes.
and only facing straight forward.
Yes. Oh no, I did not look at them at all.
But yeah, so that would be my only real critique of the Selena Kyle story, was just maybe could have fleshed out just a tad, maybe even just like through a couple sentences between the two of them, because we never get to know Annika, and maybe that's why I was really feeling it, is because we never know Annika.
Mm-hmm.
If we had spent maybe even 30 to 60 seconds with her, we would have cared just as much as Selena, and I wouldn't be asking that question at all.
That's a great point.
So there's something there. One of the things, this gets into writing and directing, I guess, a little bit, is the Batmobile intro, the way they introduced the Batmobile. Loved it. We're in the alley, right? And this is one of those classic cheats where the bad guy steps around the corner where our hero is waiting, only to be caught off guard, right? The hero's gone. He just, whatever, crawled underneath the pavement and away. It happened in the cutaway. And those are always fun cheats, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes I'm annoyed, sometimes I'm not. It just depends on how I'm taking the rest of the movie, to be honest. But anyway, however it happens, and suddenly we hear an engine rumble, and Penguin turns and looks into the alley, and we cut to its silhouette, the silhouette of the Batmobile in the alley, which is illuminated, backlit by the blue engine spark. And it's just kind of growling. And then we get this long look from the Penguin, and then we kind of do this dolly in on Catwoman, and it's a slow aching push as we're just hearing it. It's the rain and the rumble of the engine. And then we cut to Gordon, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And then the engine rumbles louder, right? And it almost explodes as it, fires out. And I love it all because there's no dialogue. There's no one asks, like, what the hell is that? No one says a word. You don't need to say a word. It's the freaking Batmobile. Don't cue it up. Just let us feel it, because this whole thing is all feel. It's a fully fleshed out moment. And it killed for me. I loved it. And I also loved the muscle car design of the Batmobile itself. I don't remember seeing this version. This feels like the apocalyptic Batmobile. And it works, man.
It's like straight out of Mad Max.
Yeah,
right?
it really does.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
freaking loved it. That really worked. What didn't work? Oh man, let's get into some of the what I'm just calling bad payoffs. For one, just before, this isn't necessarily a payoff, but the whole setup of this film is that the city is bad, and the ultimate metric of that badness is drugs. Like, that's because in the opening scene, whenever the mayor gets killed, we're watching a replay of a debate between him and Bella Real, which, by the way, I find is kind of a hilarious name. Bella, if you've seen Twilight, is the name of the opposite character, and of course Robert Pattinson making his bread on Twilight. So I don't know if that was intentional. It's kind of hard to imagine it wasn't. But there's also the double play of Bella is whatever, Italian, I don't know, I have no idea, for beautiful, and Real being kind of this play on reality, or the real beauty of the city is in this new mayor, this new hope that's coming up, who's not beholden to Falcone or whatever. So there's just some kind of, I don't know, naming symbology that they're going for in there. Whatever, maybe a little on the nose, but it doesn't bother me at all. What did bother me was drug use being the kind of ultimate measurement of how bad or good the city is, because it just strikes me as very 1992. And then we're watching Drop Heads, right? Whatever this new drug is, whatever, that felt like a really sketchy point as we're kind of winding down the drug war. We're now using drugs as some kind of ultimate evil within the city, and we need to stop it at all costs. This feels very dated, which is just, I don't know, it was weird. It was a dumb decision in my point of view. Now, one bad payoff, going back to the Batmobile, was the Penguin chase, right? It's awesome. It's chaotic. And there's some badass sequences in there, like when they start rushing against traffic. That's all working. That the explosion is working. Even Colin Farrell being this over the top, like excited, I got you, all that still worked for me. I'm in, that's fine. And of course the horror of the Batmobile coming out of the flames, and ultimately that sick sequence of the perspective of the Penguin as, you know, Batman's walking up on him. Sick. It's all working. And it's so unfortunate because ultimately it's all meaningless. It absolutely leads to nothing. Like it's just to fix the clue that they screwed up, right? We went through all that just to leave, and hey, yeah, good luck busting out of your ropes or whatever. Like that was a completely meaningless sequence, and that's really frustrating. And of course, the big mystery, the big payoff was that Falcone controlled politicians and police. Yeah, duh. This is Gotham. Like, how is this a big mystery? That's a terrible way to cap a mystery film, is by giving us the most obvious thing of all. Like, who put these presents under the tree? It was Santa Claus. Like that's a really terrible, you know, mystery. That's why. Yeah. And it sucks because they were so close to so many interesting things. Thomas Wayne being in cahoots with Falcone. Thomas Wayne is a villain. Now that's interesting. Whoa, okay, you have my interest. Now I'm not like freaked out. I'm not wowed, but I am interested in where this is going. Except he's not, and it's fine. And once again, this is a meaningless thread, right? Ultimately, Alfred's like, he had no idea. That wasn't what he intended at all. Okay, so Thomas Wayne is just kind of an ass. He's not really a big villain. That's dumb. Okay, what about the Riddler? Riddler's big scheme was to bring truth and justice to Gotham by indiscriminately killing civilians and basically being a big piece of crap himself. Like, this is a nonsensical goal for a mastermind. His big goal was to get arrested while incels kill a bunch of people. What are you talking about? And I just thought he was way more interesting when he was doing, you know, quote unquote justice for the right reasons. Because now you're starting to ask us something very interesting, right? What's the real difference between him and Batman? If their end goal is to end corruption and violence in the city, now you can start to, you know, draw some really interesting questions between them about what the meaning of justice and the meaning of what the city is going through, and what he went through as a kid in an orphanage built by one of the richest, powerful people. And they just undercut all of that. And in weird ways, like this whole thing, bring him into the light. That was his masterful clue. Like, is Riddler a genius or a complete and total idiot that's also the luckiest idiot of all time? Like, I don't think those two people can coexist, because Bruce Wayne, Batman, says himself, he doesn't miss anything. And yet it's like he missed everything. Like, this was a complete nonsensical resolution to the film. And the Riddler prisoner scene with Batman isn't really great either. I struggled. For one, as a performance, Paul Dano, I think, missed it, man. It gets a little too actory for me. He starts singing, and I think he starts overacting, and it just doesn't. It pulled me out a lot. Whereas what's frustrating about that, though, is that scene starts very interesting, right? When he starts with Bruce Wayne, because now, oh my God, he knows Batman's identity. He's going to blow the lid off this entire thing. And what is Bruce going to do? Everyone's watching. The police are watching. This is on tape. He can't do anything. He can't. Oh, never mind. He doesn't know. It's fine. This is all, again, a pointless exercise, a pointless, toothless threat. And that's really, really frustrating because Riddler ultimately isn't very interesting. He's very boring. Even that scene ends in a very kind of lame way with Batman, you know, melodramatically pounding on the glass. And it's just effortless or useless effort. And so those are the things that ultimately got to me, is that we spent 3 hours in a murder mystery, none the wiser, and none, you know, without any good shock or payoff or I don't know, even a price. I don't think there was a good price. What did we lose? Like Batman, again, going back to Batman getting breaks, he had a literal bomb go off literally in his face 5 inches away, and sure, it knocked him out, but you can't walk away unscratched. But here's the thing, they can't scratch his face, because if Bruce Wayne starts showing up to places with a busted up face, there's a lot of questions that he's not going to be able to answer. And so once again, they painted themselves into a corner that they didn't really have to do. I don't know. And so that's why I'm like, man, 3 hours is a long time to invest in a story that takes you nowhere interesting. Because if his big, lesson is that vengeance is bad, for one, I don't know where that places Batman from here on out. But two, I don't think it's a very strong through line, considering how little we know and understand about Batman himself. Like, there's no emotional payoff there, like, whatsoever. Instead, we're once again left with a voiceover kind of expositing how he sees the world now, how everything's changed. And this entire movie is filled with exposition, which isn't all bad with a mystery. Those moments are certainly going to happen, but it can't be all that and then more of that as a resolution filler. You need to have these emotional moments that build up off of emotion. They all need to be playing in harmony. Give us these emotional setups so that you can have these emotional payoffs. And then you can kind of feel the rising tension throughout the film for the stakes, whether you want to make that Batman's soul, which is usually going to be, a pretty common issue with superheroes, of them wrestling against their power, right? Because they have all this power. Are they going to use it the right way? That's usually one of the questions you want to ask in a superhero movie. And Batman kind of just toes the line throughout the entire film. I don't know. In a bigger nutshell, that's where I'm at. I don't know if you want to comment or backhand me or what, but that's
no, not at all. What did you think of Pattinson's portrayal of Batman?
I thought it was fine. I struggled to care one way or another because of how little I knew or cared about Batman himself. And so one thing I hated, and this isn't his fault, was the costume design for the Batman suit. I thought it was terrible. I thought that was a terrible design. Yeah, because Robert Pattinson isn't that big. They went full Ben Affleck on someone who's the size of me. Like, he's smaller than me, and yet they have him walking around in this puffy armored thing that literally you can see it kind of bouncing around, and it doesn't look functional as it's portrayed throughout the film, right? He has all these interesting grips and things around, and I don't know that we really see the functionality pay off with the design. And so I thought the suit itself was just overly designed. They should have slimmed it down a hell of a lot.
I could see that, but if he's being shot and it's quote unquote bulletproof, like,
sure, yeah,
whoa,
okay,
then that shit's got to be thick.
Touché. Yeah, that's fair.
So maybe I totally get that, because when at one point where we see him from the back, it's like zooming into him and he's got his shirt off and he's like hunched over a table, and I'm thinking, God, he's so scrawny.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that, like, wow, he's super scrawny.
Whereas Ben Affleck has got a good, I don't know, 50, 60 pounds on him, and that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, that's a freaking like large Batman. Right. Give it to me. But this version, I'm like, I'd rather see him leaner, because especially his fighting style kind of oscillates between quick and brutal. And I think you can be brutal and still lean. Yeah,
for sure.
And so
I get that.
I'm on the fence. Like, I don't necessarily think it was a bad portrayal. I just don't think I had a lot to go on. It was so moody without anything to emotionally underpin it. It was just kind of relying on moodiness to sell his character, as opposed to give us a character who has a reason to feel and act this way. It just wasn't fleshed out.
Yeah, to be honest, I think out of all the episodes we've had, I agree with everything you've said. And you've kind of changed my mind on some points of I still love the film.
Yeah.
I would go watch it again tomorrow. But I think you're spot on with the story, and like, these, when you were saying half these points, I was just nodding like, that's right. Oh yeah, that didn't make sense. And yeah, no, actually that didn't feel super good. Like the Riddler scene in the prison, like that felt really hokey when he's like yelling, no, no, and all that stuff. And it didn't really land, but I was just so happy, honestly, that Pattinson, I loved his portrayal.
Yeah.
And I was just so happy that I actually liked a Batman portrayal for the first time since Keaton.
Yeah.
That I just didn't even give a shit what else was happening in some ways. But I think that you shed a massive light and a lot of points that really make a lot of sense. I did feel really weird about the bring him into the light thing, where he realizes and that, oh, he's like standing in the light or whatever. It's like, well, wait a minute. Batman didn't actually put him in the light. It was the Penguin trying to shoot him. How could the Riddler have known that was going to happen? There's no way, and so maybe he just meant bring him outside. I don't know. Like Falcone is never outside. He could have shot him at any point. So
Right.
that
Right.
totally makes sense. And then, I liked the bombs placed around the city. I liked the cost of, now the city's going to be underwater, like it's like a big deal, but what was like the result supposed to be?
Right. Because I think it was more or less they knew we needed to have a big set piece, a big action sequence, and they built from that backwards. I think they may have started prematurely without really thinking through, because I as a sequence I like it. Like I love the idea and the explosions, the visuals. I mean, as a plan and a methodology for achieving a goal, Riddler is he riddles me.
Well, I mean, because the cost, that you made a good point, was so that all of those incels or whatever they were could then just start picking people off. Well, if you have something else happen where they're all, because all the people were already in there, they were there for that convention. So, and really the people that you wanted to shoot were like, the cops and this Bella woman. So that she was already there. You could have picked her off at any point. So why?
Or put all 7 vans worth of bombs in that building.
And
right. Then you're targeting the only people you're trying to target, which is ostensibly the well-to-do, even though there would still be a large degree of indiscriminate killing that would still take place. At least you're not targeting the entire city that you're claiming, or at least pretending to care about, through all these other shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah.
Man. Great points, man. You've opened my eyes to a lot of it, actually, and it makes me want to go watch it again to see if I really agree. I mean, I agree. I definitely agree with. Most of it, if not all of it, for sure. I think, I'll have to watch it again now.
Nice. Yeah.
Well done.
That's all I got. I don't know if you have any other thoughts, or if you want to move into the recos.
No, I still loved it. I want to watch it again now with your notes, and I think that it'll give me another good perspective, actually, to watch it with another opinion, like an opinion that I respect and look for in a lot of ways. Because I went in this movie having no idea. I saw the first trailer, and then I didn't watch anything else really, and I didn't want to look at any of the reviews, and I think the reviews are actually pretty good on this, at least from what I've seen since watching the movie. But just going into it blind, I still really enjoyed it. So
yeah, I'm not sure if I even saw a preview, or at least an entire preview. I saw bits and pieces. One of the frustrating viewing experiences that I had with this was that, I don't know if this happened in your theater, but in mine, they played this DC promo right before the movie started that had clips of the movie I was about to watch.
Oh, God. Like, no, they didn't do that.
What are y'all doing? And it wasn't even a good promo. But just Stop. That to me is really, really frustrating. Like, I'm about to watch the movie and y'all are showing me the movie before I'm watching it. Stop it.
Yeah,
Stop
I did not have that, but I did have some
Okay.
annoying high school kids sitting right behind me talking the whole freaking time.
Damn.
I even had to like look at them, do
Oh,
the whole
yeah.
like look, and
Yeah.
didn't matter because there were like 8 of them. So like
Yeah.
4 others kept talking.
Yeah,
It was so
you're
stupid.
screwed on that one.
Yeah.
Nice. What are you going to recommend this week?
So this week I'm gonna recommend a Pattinson film that we've watched a while back that I just really like him. I don't know. It's weird because I hated Twilight with a passion,
Right.
but everything he's done since then I've really enjoyed. At least even if I didn't enjoy the movie, I enjoyed his part in it. I really like what he did with Batman this time. So I'm going to recommend The Lighthouse, which is really a strange film, to say the least. But definitely worth it, just from the standpoint of how did they pull off this black and white at night kind of like crazy thing, and the performances are fantastic. His accent situation, whatever, I don't know. His accent coach is amazing, and he's awesome in it. So
Nice.
Willem Dafoe is also in it, and he's incredible as well.
Yeah, he really is. He's a fantastic actor, Robert Pattinson. Obviously, Willem Dafoe is legend. But yeah, Pattinson is an incredible actor. And I've seen so many of his films that, there's no question. And it's one of those things, like, Twilight did him a lot of favors as far as notoriety, allowed him to, start picking his own projects. It just didn't do any favors because of the writing to his acting. I don't know, probably, whatever. I'm going to recommend a murder mystery that I think is excellent, that I love. Maybe, not everyone likes it, but it works for me. And it's a movie called Identity. It's got Amanda Peet and John Cusack. It's from a while back, probably like early 2000s, maybe in like 2002, 2003. But it's a fun little horror murder thing. And I think it's entertaining and interesting. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to do a little indie film called Sound of My Voice. I predict we're going to really enjoy this episode. And if you haven't seen that, it's by Britt Marling and Zhao, big long last name. And so I'm a huge Britt Marling fan, and so I'm really excited to take a look at that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review on the tunes, and leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, if you want to weigh in on Batman and why I don't get it. Did you get it? Did you really get it? Did you get it? Let me explain it to you, Wes. If you want to let me know, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/thebatman.
And our quote of the day today is from Agatha Christie. Any woman can fool a man if she wants to, and if he's in love with her. That's pretty much spot on, bro.
Oh, it's so good.
And it's great with the whole Catwoman situation with Batman. It's great.
Totally. And I picked this one for multiple reasons. One, Agatha Christie, right? She wrote a lot of murder mysteries. But then this quote I thought was so perfect because I think people are going to love the Batman because they love Batman. And, you just want to shut your brain off a little and enjoy it. And I like that people like to like things. I like to like things. Right. And so I like that idea that, that same idea, a woman can fool a guy if he's in love with her and if she wants to do that. Well, we're in love with the Batman. And of course, we're going to get fooled into thinking this is an amazing movie, but it's got so many flaws in my perspective that it's fooled a lot of people into writing a lot of really good reviews. And they're going to look back in about 3 years and say, what? Wait, hold on. Let's talk about this.
Wes can see the future. I love it. Awesome. Great quote, man.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I had a really great time talking about this. I learned a whole lot. Thank you, Wes, for opening my eyes in a few subtle ways. As Wes said, please review us, subscribe, share us on iTunes or with your friends or anything like that, and let us know if we got something right or wrong and what you'd like to see us do. We'd love to hear from you. And join us next week when we're doing Sound of My Voice. Until then, I am Todd.
I am Wes.
Go watch some movies.